They say when the sea swallows a soul too soon, it doesn't forget. Some claim that in the dead of night, when the fog rolls thick and the waves whisper secrets, a forgotten lighthouse blinks to life on a cliff that doesn't exist on any map. It burns not for ships, but for spirits, calling them back again and again. This is the story of 7 bloodlines tied by fate to that cursed beacon, a tale buried beneath generations of silence, madness, and death. They called it the Lighthouse of the Lost, but none who entered its light ever came out the same. If you were the last one left, haunted by dreams you never lived, stalked by shadows only you can see, would you follow the light or run from it? Comment below. Do you believe places can trap souls forever? Have you ever seen something that shouldn't exist, but you swear it was there? Let us know your experience. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you're ready for the darkness ahead. There's no turning back once the light calls you. 1883. Ellismore Coast, England. The storm raged like a beast with no name. Waves slammed the jagged cliffs as the wind howled through the heavens. Lightning cracked above the sea, illuminating the silhouette of a lone lighthouse standing tall and defiant against the chaos. Inside, Keeper Thaddeus Grigg tightened the belt of his coat and wiped sweat from his brow, though the room was bitterly cold. He hadn't lit the beacon in weeks. There were no ships expected, no visitors, no reason for light to shine, at least not for the living. The townsfolk of nearby Right Haven had long abandoned their trust in the old lighthouse. Legends had bloomed like rot in the shadows. Tales of ghost ships seen hovering in the fog, sailors lured to their deaths by a light that shouldn't burn. Thaddeus, an ex-naval officer turned recluse, had dismissed such nonsense. That is, until his wife Honora vanished without a trace 2 winters ago. Last seen walking toward the cliff in a trance. He never found her body, only her locket, halfway down the rocks. Thaddeus hadn't been the same since. That night the storm seemed to breathe. The walls of the lighthouse groaned like something alive. He poured himself a drink, hands trembling, and stared at the darkened lantern room above. The wind began to whisper. No, not the wind. It was a voice. Thaddeus, light the flame. He shot to his feet, heart pounding. The voice was unmistakable. Honora, impossible. He stumbled up the iron staircase, each step colder than the last. The lantern room loomed above, sealed for years, but now it was open. The heavy metal door swayed gently. No human hand could have unlatched it. The air changed as he entered. Time slowed. The storm's sound dulled to a distant heartbeat. There on the platform stood a brass lantern, unlit but pulsing, as though something within wanted out. And beside it, a figure, hair long and dark, face half-turned, shoulders draped in the sea-soaked cloak he buried Honora in. Honora, he whispered. The figure did not turn. She lifted a hand and pointed to the lantern. Light it, she said softly. Against every sane instinct, Thaddeus struck the match. The instant the flame touched the wick, a scream erupted from the sea below. Not human, not animal, something vast and ancient. The light roared to life in a burst of sickly green, spiraling through the fog like a signal to the abyss. The figure vanished. The door behind him slammed shut, trapping him in the lantern room. He tried to scream, but his voice died in his throat. Shapes began to form in the swirling mist outside the glass. Faces, bloated and pale. Eyes black as ink, pressed to the panes watching him. Thaddeus fell to his knees. The light had summoned them. 3 days later, a local fisherman, Jonah Cray, found the lighthouse's door ajar. The storm had passed, but the smell of rot clung to the air. He stepped inside, calling out, "Mr. Grigg, you all right?" Silence. The tower was cold. Every step echoed like footsteps behind him. He ascended the staircase, feeling a pressure grow behind his eyes, head pounding, ears ringing. When he reached the lantern room, the air dropped 10 degrees. Thaddeus stood there, unmoving, facing the light. His skin was ash gray, his eyes sunken deep and glassy. "Mr. Grigg?" Jonah touched his shoulder. The body collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. On the inside of the lantern room's glass, etched in blood, were the words, "The light remembers, the lost return." Jonah fled down the steps, but not before catching a glimpse. Out in the sea, a ship, silent, unmoving, with torn sails and a crew of shadows that stared straight at him. 2 weeks later, Haven buried Thaddeus Grigg in shallow ground. Only one man attended, Father Elric Bellamy, a priest with a quiet obsession with maritime lore. He knew of the lighthouse's past. Long before it was built, the cliff had been a pagan burial site. Centuries ago, locals would perform sea rituals, sacrifices to ancient gods who lived below the waves. The lighthouse was meant to cleanse the dark, but was instead built atop a curse. Father Elric warned the village council. No one listened. That night, he returned to the lighthouse alone, carrying a satchel of salt, prayer scrolls, and an old yellowed map. But the tower wasn't empty. The stairs creaked behind him. He turned. Nothing there. Then a sound from above, metal dragging against stone. He looked up and saw the shadows in the lantern room begin to move on their own. As he climbed, the air thickened, like trying to breathe through wet wool. The lantern was already lit, casting its spectral green light into the night. In the glass reflection, he saw himself, but not as he was. His face looked older, half rotted, and his eyes were missing. He screamed and dropped the bag. Something grabbed his leg, cold, thin fingers. He looked down. Honora. Only her face wasn't human anymore. He kicked free and sprinted down the stairs, her screams chasing him through the tower. Elric escaped the lighthouse, but his sanity did not. The next morning, he was found on the chapel steps, muttering about the drowned ones who breathe in fog and a beacon built for the dead. The council had the lighthouse sealed. Again. 30 years later, 1913, the lighthouse remains shuttered, its presence forgotten by maps and records. But legends do not sleep. They fester. And across the sea, a child named Corwin Thatch began to draw lighthouses in his sleep, each one identical to the tower on Ellismore. He had never seen it, nor had his parents ever spoken its name. Yet each drawing bore the same caption in jagged handwriting: "The light still burns." 1913. Inverleigh, Scotland. Young Corwin Thatch was not like other children. While others played with marbles and made slingshots, he wandered the coastline barefoot, eyes fixed to the distant horizon. His parents thought it was a phase, grief manifesting since the death of his grandfather, Jonah Cray, the fisherman who found Thaddeus Grigg's body decades earlier. What they didn't know was that Jonah had left Corwin something strange in his will: an old leather satchel containing yellowed sea maps, a broken compass that always pointed west, and a small iron key with the inscription, E.G. Tower, Ellismore. Corwin clutched it every night as he dreamt. His dreams always began the same way: standing alone on a cliff, staring at a lighthouse cloaked in mist, a dim green light pulsing like a heartbeat at its peak. Sometimes voices called to him, sometimes screams. By age 14, Corwin had begun sleepwalking. He'd wake on the edge of the pier, eyes wide open, muttering things no child should know. Then the hallucination started. One afternoon, autumn. His mother, May Thatch, found him in the attic, speaking to the wall. She called his name, but he didn't respond. His hand trembled, drawing frantic circles on the wood using a piece of coal. Lighthouses, over and over again, hundreds of them. "I have to go," Corwin whispered. "The light is sick. It needs me." May slapped the charcoal from his hand, terrified. "What are you talking about?" Corwin looked at her, and for a split second, his eyes were black, like holes punched through reality. That night, May heard a scraping sound from the roof. Assuming it was raccoons, she climbed the attic stairs with a lantern. Instead, she found the window wide open, and Corwin gone. All that remained was a map on the floor, the one marked Ellismore. 6 days later, Haven. The village hadn't changed much. Time didn't touch Haven, it feared it. The lighthouse was still sealed, its rusted doors chained with holy sigils and wax seals, but the cliff around it was slowly eroding, like the land wanted to forget it ever bore the weight of such evil. Corwin arrived on foot, clothes torn from travel, eyes wild with purpose. He didn't remember how he got there. He didn't need to. The lighthouse was waiting. Locals whispered when they saw him. A fisherman swore the boy looked exactly like Thaddeus Grigg at that age. The pub's old-timers muttered about the curse returning, but no one dared stop him. Not when the light, dead for decades, flared to life the moment his foot touched the path leading to the cliff. Green fire, brighter than the moon. Inside the lighthouse, Corwin approached the iron door. The seals burned away in a burst of steam, the lock unfastening with a groan like something exhaling after a long slumber. He stepped inside. The air was wet and warm, like a breath down his spine. The tower welcomed him, but it wasn't empty. The walls, once bare stone, were covered in names carved into the rock, hundreds of them, etched with fingernails and rusted knives. Corwin ran his fingers over one, Honora Grigg, and beside it, Corwin Thatch. His breath caught. He turned, but the door was gone, replaced by solid wall. Then the stairs began to melt downward, like wax, twisting into impossible geometry. The tower was shifting, breathing. He climbed. With every step, whispers grew louder. They didn't speak to him. They spoke through him. His fingers bled from gripping the rail. But he climbed until the steps ended. The lantern room, the lantern room. The glass was slick with condensation. The floor sticky with salt. In the center stood the ancient brass lantern, its flame dancing like a living thing. Behind it, her Honora, only now, her skin was translucent, veins like black worms beneath the surface. Her mouth opened too wide when she smiled. "Hello again," she whispered. Corwin tried to run, but the room folded inward, trapping him in a loop. No matter where he turned, he was back at the lantern. "You came," she said. "Your blood brought you here." Jonah heard the song. So did Thaddeus. "And now you." "What? Or you?" Corwin choked. Honora's face warped, dissolving into a blur of drowned faces. A chorus of the dead speaking as one. "We are the lost, the taken, the forgotten. And this is our home." Outside, Haven, the villagers gathered on the shore watching the green flame burn above the tower. The sea had turned black, no waves, just stillness. Then a horn, a deep hollow blast, echoed across the bay. From the fog emerged a ship, the Mersey's Wake, last seen in 1879. Its sails were torn, crew unmoving, but not dead. They stood at attention, faces blank, watching the lighthouse. Then, one by one, they looked inland, to the village. Back inside, Corwin's body convulsed. The lantern's flame had entered his chest. His veins glowed green, his heart beat in sync with the light. Honora stepped closer, placing a hand on his face. "You will open the way." "I don't want this," he cried. "It's not about want, it's about blood. And yours is screaming for the sea." With a final burst of strength, Corwin threw the lantern to the ground. It didn't shatter. Instead, it split open like a mouth. And from it came a hand, long, skeletal, slick with brine. It grabbed Corwin by the ankle and dragged him downward through the floor into the unknown below the tower. His scream echoed down the staircase, across the bay into the village. And then silence. 3 days later, a search party entered the lighthouse. They never returned. Their bodies were never found. But Haven began to change. The fog never lifted. The tides refused to recede. The church bell tolled at midnight without a soul near it. And the light never turned off again. 1942, London, England. During the Blitz, the bombs fell like thunder from the sky. But Alara Bellamy hardly flinched. She was used to the sound. Her ears had learned to filter chaos. As a field nurse tending to victims in underground hospitals, she saw things daily that most could never unsee. But nothing prepared her for the letter that arrived on the eve of her 29th birthday. The envelope was brittle. The ink faded. It bore no return address. Only her name in cursive, Miss Alara Bellamy. Inside were 2 items. 1, a page torn from an ancient ledger listing lighthouse keepers. At the top, Thaddeus Grigg. At the bottom, her grandfather, Elric Bellamy. 2, a key, heavy, iron, marked with the engraving, "Return the light." That night her dreams returned. The dreams, fog as thick as wool, salt, burning her nose. She wandered barefoot across a jagged cliff, her white nurse's dress soaked in blood and seawater. A voice called to her from a green beacon high above, a voice both hers and not hers. She saw faces, a boy with glowing veins, a woman with eyes like deep sea glass, a man screaming as tendrils wrapped around his limbs, pulling him into the spiral stairwell. Then, silent, followed by a whisper. "Your blood is the gate, Alara. The tide is rising again." 2 days later, Haven, revisited. Alara took leave from service, claiming family illness. No one questioned her. She traveled west by train, then cart, then foot. Her final destination wasn't on any map, but she knew the way. Her body remembered even if her mind didn't. Fog greeted her at the cliffs. The lighthouse stood as it always had, dead stone and rusted metal, but the light burned faint green through the mist. She stepped toward it, heart pounding. The door was open, waiting. Inside the tower, her first breath inside the lighthouse tasted like salted blood. Her skin prickled with cold, as memories not her own poured into her head. She climbed the stairs slowly. Voices chattered in the walls. They knew her name. Alara, Alara, Alara. The air thickened with each step, time bending around her. She glanced at her reflection in the glass of a broken porthole. But the reflection didn't move. It just stared and smiled. Her legs turned to eye. Then she heard it, a sharp metal click behind her. The door at the base had closed. The lantern room. She reached the top and found a woman already there. Back turned, pale skin, long hair like kelp. "Alara," the woman said without turning. "Who are you?" she asked, voice shaking. "I am what remains of Anora," the figure replied, "and what you must become. I'm not like them. I'm not part of this." And Nora turned, her mouth opened, and didn't stop opening. From within came a song, not music, but a melody that cut into her skull. Alara clutched her ears, fell to her knees, screamed. Visions exploded behind her eyes. Bodies hanging from the tower rafters, ships with crews of bone and shadow, children born with gills, townsfolk sinking into the earth, smiling as they disappeared. The song grew louder, then stopped. Alara stood, swaying. Her nose bled. Her hands trembled. The lantern pulsed and from it rose a shadow with glowing eyes. "Alara Bellamy," it hissed. "Your grandfather left you unfinished business." The light flared. Images appeared on the glass. Corwin Thatch, screaming as he was pulled under. Father Elric, burning sigils into the walls. Jonah Cray, watching a ship drift in from the mist. All connected, all cursed. And Nora stepped forward and handed Alara a small mirror. Inside it, she saw her own face, morph into every bloodline before her, one after another, all watching her, all waiting. "You have to choose." And Nora said, "Seal the gate, or open it wide." Back in Haven, the villagers had long since stopped trusting time. Days bled into nights. The fog no longer left. Crops withered. The sea was still, unnaturally calm. But now the light was burning brighter than ever. And they felt it. First, the children began humming songs they'd never learned. Then, animals vanished into the mist. And soon after, people began to walk toward the lighthouse at night, eyes rolled back, as though guided by invisible threads. They never came back. Meanwhile in the tower, Alara resisted the pull of the lantern, but it thrummed like a heartbeat in her chest. A trapdoor opened in the floor, revealing stairs descending into darkness. "You must go," Nora said. "Down, where the truth sleeps." Alara descended. The stairs went far too deep to be possible. As she walked, she passed strange carvings on the walls, creatures with too many limbs, eyes where mouths should be, altars built from bone. Then she saw it, a massive chamber beneath the lighthouse. filled with shallow black water. At its center, an altar, floating above it. Corwin Thatch, still alive, eyes wide open, glowing. He whispered, "You're the last one, Alara." "What is this place?" she asked. "The mouth between worlds," Corwin replied. "They used us to keep it shut. Every generation, a lock made of blood. But your blood, it's different." Behind her something moved in the water. Something huge. She turned slowly. A shape rose from the pool, towering, skeletal, wrapped in seaweed and fog. Its face hidden behind a veil of barnacles. Its voice sounded like thunder drowning in a well. "Bellamy, Greg, Cray, Thatch, you were all pieces." "Pieces of what?" Alara whispered. "The key." A sudden force threw her to the altar. The lantern from above fell into her hands. Its flame now white-hot. Corwin screamed, "If you light it here, it opens everything. But if I don't, we're all already dead." Alara hesitated. The whispers returned. Hundreds of them. "Let us in. Light the way. Let us out." The water began to boil. The walls cracked. Her vision blurred. And then, she lit the lantern. 1942. Beneath the lighthouse. The flame ignited with a sound like bones snapping underwater. A roar surged through the chamber. A concussive pulse of green fire that climbed the walls like serpents. Alara screamed as the heat fused her palms to the lantern's iron grip, her body trembling under the weight of what she had just awakened. Corwin Thatch collapsed, eyes rolling white. The water around the altar began to move, rising not like a wave, but like a living thing, slithering upward against gravity. It peeled back from the stone walls, revealing ancient markings underneath, spirals and runes older than language. From the far end of the pool, a mouth opened. Not a creature's, a literal mouth in the stone lined with jagged teeth of coral and rusted ship nails. It inhaled deeply, the air drawn from the room in a violent whoosh that knocked Alara to her knees. She heard voices again. But this time they weren't whispers. They were screaming. Back in the village, Haven, the light over the tower had turned crimson, flashing in irregular bursts like a warning beacon. Those who hadn't already vanished now wandered the fog-drenched streets naked and silent, salt crusted on their skin. Father Merton, the last clergyman in the village, stood at the old church's broken threshold, reading verses from a water-damaged Bible. His voice cracked. His hands bled. Behind him, his congregation, what was left of it, began to chant something else entirely. Not scripture, something older. He turned, horrified. They were speaking in the tongue of the drowned, a language he had seen once before, carved into the walls of the lighthouse during a daring blessing he'd performed 30 years ago. Then the bell above the church rang without wind, and the fog began to move inward, not outward, toward the tower. Corwin lay motionless beside her, but his mouth was open, repeating 3 words over and over in a voice not his own. "We are becoming. We are becoming. We are becoming." The water rose to her chest. It was cold, too cold for water, like the breath of a tomb. Shapes began forming in the black depths, not fish, not men, something in between. Long-limbed, eyes glowing faintly, skin slick with moss and rot. They floated upward, mouths open in silence, and then they began to sing. It was not music, it was a curse. Alara clutched the lantern and backed away into the narrow corridor from which she'd come. She fled upward, the walls groaning around her, stairs reshaping mid-step. The lighthouse was alive now, its heartbeat echoing through every stone, every window pane, and it was starving. As she climbed, hallucinations clawed at her sanity. She saw her mother on the stairwell landing, beckoning her with stitched lips, her own childhood self, sobbing in the corner, fingers webbed and dripping brine. Corwin walking beside her, eyes gone, singing the tune of the sea in reverse. None of it was real, or perhaps all of it was. By the time she reached the lantern room again, her mind felt unstitched. Her memories came and went like waves. She wasn't sure who she was anymore. Alara, Anora, someone else entirely. The lantern had become part of her hand, fused to her flesh. It throbbed with an intelligence she could feel in her spine, and waiting in the lantern room was someone she never expected to see, her grandfather, Elric Bellamy. The ghost of Elric. He looked young, whole, dressed in the uniform of a lighthouse keeper. The same as in the photos Alara had seen in her childhood. But his eyes, they were wrong. They were wet. "Alara," he said, voice hollow. "You've come further than the other." "I lit the lantern," she said, tears choking her voice. "Why did I do that? What is it?" He looked at her hand, where iron met skin, and sighed. "It's not a lantern. It's a beacon, a signal, a promise to the ones who wait beneath. You brought this on." "No," he whispered. "We just opened the door." Suddenly his form flickered, his face twisted, and a voice that was not his spoke from his mouth. "We are the deep remembrance, the sea's memory, the price of ignorance." Alara backed away, her heart slammed in her chest. "What do you want?" "To return, to walk again on the land, to breathe your sky, to feel your fear." And then his face melted into a dripping barnacle-crusted mask, and vanished completely. She was alone again, except she wasn't. The tower splits, the walls cracked, salt water poured from the stones, as if the entire tower were drowning from within. Glass shattered. The lantern exploded in green flame, and Alara screamed as a shape erupted from her shadow, a version of herself, with gills and hollow eyes, dripping black sludge. It stared at her, then whispered, "You are me, and I am the key." The double lung. Alara fell backward through the shattered glass of the lantern room, tumbling down the tower's height in slow motion. The fog rushed past her face. The sea below opened like a black maw, and just before impact, the sea caught her like hand. Elsewhere, aboard the Mercy's wake, far from the coast, the long-lost ghost ship drifted under moonlight. Its sails still hung in tatters, its crew a patchwork of bone and rotted flesh. But now something stirred among them. A bell rang below deck, a soft humming began among the dead, and in the sky above, the stars blinked and didn't come back. But back in the water, Alara woke underwater, but she wasn't drowning. She was breathing, surrounded by darkness. She opened her eyes and saw them, hundreds of faces in the depths, some familiar, some alien. They circled her, eyes glowing, mouths moving in unison, and she heard it again deep in her bones. "You are one of us now." Then her fingers began to change, her eyes, her mind, and a new voice rose in her throat. 1942. Somewhere between land and abyss. Alara's screams were silent now, muffled by leagues of water and the rebirth of her lungs. She floated within a dream that was too real, surrounded by echoes and shadows. Her fingers were no longer fingers. They had webbed together thin membranes stretching between knuckles. She looked down at her reflection in the obsidian water. No, not her reflection. A version of her, still human, still afraid, thrashing beneath the surface as if trying to escape the body she now occupied. "You are not drowning," came a voice from the dark. "You are surfacing." The truth hit her with the cold weight of the deep. She hadn't fallen, she had been taken. In the village, 1 mile from the tower, the land was dying. No birds, no wind. The fog pressed into every crack of every home like a living skin. Crops had blackened. Wells had turned to brine. And at the center of the square the villagers dug a pit, a hole where the old well once stood. Their hands were bloodied, their eyes milky and vacant. They did not speak. They dug because the voice in the fog told them to. At the base of the pit, something pulsed, fleshy, warm, and alive. A heart. The villages, the seas, the lighthouses, and it was beating faster. Deep, beneath the tower, Alara swam through a corridor of saltstone and pulsating vines. Every pulse throbbed in sync with her own heartbeat. She passed murals, not painted but grown from coral and blood. They told stories. One depicted a man swallowed by a wave, emerging as a god wrapped in chains of seaweed. Another showed the lighthouse atop a massive creature, not a building but an eye blinking through time. And another showed her, Alara, holding the beacon, leading a procession of drowned villagers toward a gate made of bones. She reached a cavern filled with coral whales. Inside they waited. The drowned court, 13 thrones, each throne a skeleton of shipwrecked wood and rotted iron. And on each throne, a figure sat, twisted parodies of humans, eyes missing, teeth elongated, hair made of sea snakes and barnacles. Elara stepped forward, pulled by an unseen force. The largest of the drowned rose from its throne. It towered above her, wrapped in kelp and riddled with mouths. "You have lit the beacon," it croaked. "The pact is renewed. I didn't choose this." Elara shouted, the words gurgling out of her altered throat. "You were born chosen. Your bloodline kept the prison closed." The others echoed in unison, but now the flame dimmed, and the gate awakens. One of the drowned stepped forward and placed a clawed hand on Elara's shoulder. "You must finish what your ancestors began." "I don't understand," she whispered. "You are the bridge, Elara Bellamy, flesh of the Watcher, seed of the lantern, chosen of the deep remembrance." She stepped back, shaking. "No, I'm not your key." They laughed, a gurgling, dead sound. "You already unlocked the door." Back on land, the fog thickens. Jonah Cray's granddaughter Mira watched from her attic as the lighthouse beamed pulses of green into the sky. Her mother was gone. Her father sat on the roof, whispering to the clouds. She clutched her radio, the only working thing in the house. Static. Then a voice. "To all who hear me, run, run from Lighthaven. The dead are walking. The sea is inside us." Mira dropped the radio. The voice had been her own. Elara's mind, splintering. She no longer knew where her thoughts began or ended. The lighthouse was in her now. The flame behind her eyes flickered, revealing memories from all the generations before her. Thaddeus Grigg, carving symbols into the bones of his own sons. And Nora whispering to the sea, bleeding into its foam. Corwin building ships to nowhere, guided by dreams of Leviathans. Each one had tried to seal the gate. Each one had failed. And now the gate was no longer waiting to open. It was pushing through. She heard the drowned speak once more. "The sky is thinning. The stars are no longer safe. The tide comes not from below, but above." A vision, the beacon inverted. She stood in the lantern room again. Only this time the flame burned upward. A reverse candle that lit the heavens in unholy green. Ships drifted through the sky, anchored to stars now bleeding brine. The villagers floated above the cliffs, limbs twisting like seaweed, faces contorted into masks of blissful agony. She saw Mira Cray's face, young, wide-eyed, and already beginning to change. The flame pulsed harder, and then she saw it, the eye, not of the lighthouse, but of the thing beneath it, older than water, buried by her ancestors and mistakenly crowned with stone. It blinked, and her mind fractured. Awakening, Elara clawed her way from the tide pool near the lighthouse, gasping, coughing black water. She looked human again, but the sea still sang in her veins. Above her the tower groaned. The light had stopped flashing. It was now steady, calling, drawing everything in. And she wasn't alone. Dozens of people, villagers, strangers, children walked toward the lighthouse, faces slack, feet bare, following the pulse of the flame. The procession had begun. She knew what came next. The final piece was being placed, and the flame was only the beginning. 1942, nightfall in Lighthaven. The sun no longer rose. A false twilight blanketed the village, casting elongated shadows that moved even when no one did. The sea had pulled back from the shore, not receding in tide, but in fear, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath, retreating from the thing now stirring beneath the lighthouse. And still they came, from every crevice of the crumbling town. The people of Lighthaven moved as one, not zombies, not possessed, hollow, their souls already fed to the flame, their husks drawn forward by the call of the beacon, eyes glowing a dull green, mouths parted in perpetual moans that mimicked the rhythm of the waves. The lighthouse no longer pulsed, it burned like a star, unblinking, unforgiving, unnatural. Her body had mostly returned to human shape, but she could still feel it, the salt in her blood, the hum of voices below the surface, always singing, always watching. Corwin was gone, swallowed by the thing in the depths. Elara was alone. Except, not quite. The flame had tied itself to her, and through it she could feel the memories of every ancestor who had climbed these steps, each haunted by the same truth. They had delayed the breach, never stopped it, until now. The beacon room, now a womb. It was no longer a room of glass and steel. It had transformed, mutated, become a chamber of sinew and stone, a womb of the sea, birthing something vast and terrible. The lantern sat at the center, hovering, spinning slowly, wrapped in tendrils that pulsed like umbilical cords. Alara stepped inside, and the tendrils responded, twitching with recognition. The voice of the drowned echoed around her. The gate is ready. The price is due. The sky must bleed. Alara raised her hand. The lantern responded, its flame flaring green-hot. Beneath the lighthouse, the sea screamed. Her parents were gone. Her home had collapsed in on itself, dragged into the earth by roots of salt and bone. She found others, children mostly, survivors. One girl, Maddie, had no eyes but could see. She said the Green Lady would come for them. Another boy had webbed fingers and claimed to dream in languages he'd never spoken. They weren't survivors, they were seedlings. And something was growing inside them. Back in the tower, the procession begins. Alara looked out the shattered window of the beacon chamber and watched them come. The villagers, some walked, some crawled, a few floated, suspended like puppets in a windless stage play, all silent, all climbing. The tower had extended itself, a spine of bone and barnacle, stairwells twisting in directions that defied reality. The tower was no longer just a structure. It was a conduit, a throat, through which the world was being unmade. The first of the villagers reached the chamber. They bowed, and then they offered themselves to the flame. One by one, their bodies burned, not in fire but in memory. The lantern swallowed their essence. Their lives flickered through Alara's mind. Births, laughter, regrets, love, rage, then vanished into the flame. Fuel, visions return. The lighthouse blinked, and with each blink, a new world appeared before Alara's eyes. A great city under the sea, made of teeth and songs. A sky filled with eyes blinking in unison. A universe of endless oceans, each with its own drowned god. Her own face, aged beyond death, smiling as she lit the beacon on another world. The tower had become a beacon across dimensions, a signal to the lost, to the devourers, to the forgotten things between time. And the door was wide open. Jonah Cray's fate. Deep in the cellar of the collapsed church, Jonah Cray stirred. His eyes opened, glowing like submerged lanterns. He had not drowned. He had been transformed, given purpose, given voice. As he stepped into the light, the skin sloughed from his face, revealing a skull made of coral and bronze. He was the herald now, the one to lead the final procession, and the drowned followed. Alara's choice, the drowned court appeared again, their thrones hovering in the chamber with her. You will be the flame mother, they said. You will light the stars anew. She shook her head. I didn't come here to rule. You came to open the. You came to feed the dark between worlds. The lantern's tendrils wrapped around her legs, her waist, her throat. They didn't strangle, they fused. A halo of green flame rose from her skull, eyes glowing like twin stars. Her body levitated above the altar, and far above, in the sky, a tear opened, not in the clouds, in reality. Through it, an ocean roared, not ours. Another, and her scream became a siren's song, echoing from one end of the ocean to another, pulling in ships from every corner of the sea. The beacon surged, and the final procession began. All who had been marked would come. All who had heard the flame would answer. And in the depths, the thing beneath the lighthouse stirred awake. Great Haven, no longer on any map. The sea had swallowed the coastline, but not with water, with memory. Houses, trees, tombstones, gone, yet eerily present in glimmering after images. As if the town were half remembered by the world. Wind no longer howled, it hummed. The air thickened with voices, none human, all ancient. Above it all stood the lighthouse, now alive, no longer stone, but sinew scales and blinking lights that passed for eyes. It reached past the clouds, piercing through dimensions like a spear made of grief. It was no longer a tower, it was a spine, and at its crown was Alara. Alara, bound and becoming. Her body hovered inside the lantern room, arms outstretched, tendrils from the beacon fused into her skin like a living crown of kelp and flame. Her eyes were bottomless void. She no longer breathed. She pulsed in time with the flame. But inside her mind, Ilara still was. A sliver, a spark, a memory of herself screaming against the symphony of the drowned. She could feel Mira below, running, resisting, alive. The last unlit wick, Mira Cray, the final spark. She ran with Maddie, the eyeless girl who could see, through a landscape folding in on itself. Roads melted into rivers. Skies bent down to touch the earth. Trees whispered her name in reverse. "Don't listen," Maddie cried. "They want your name. Once they take your name, you forget who you are." They reached the base of the lighthouse. It towered so high now, it pierced stars that didn't belong to this universe. The entrance yawned open, pulsing like the mouth of a god. "Maddie," Mira whispered, clutching her friend's hand. "What's at the top?" Maddie looked up, her sockets wept blood. You, not just her own bloodline, but everyone who had touched its light. lThe Grigg, carving runes with his own teeth. Enora chanting with a forked tongue. Corwin drinking salt until his veins burst. Jonah Cray, splitting open the veil with a prayer. The stairs changed beneath her feet. Bone, coral, wood, cloud, silence. And always, always that light above, growing brighter, calling. She wanted to stop. She couldn't. Ghost vessels, their hulls stitched from lost time, carried souls too far gone to remember they were once people. And in front of them, heralding their arrival, Jonah Cray. He led them through the sky, stepping across stars as though they were stepping stones. He raised a hand. The flame within the beacon boomed, and the sky itself cracked. The gate was opening, and what lay beyond, wanted in. Each now stood taller than buildings, their bodies stitched from wreckage and sea beasts, crowns of barnacles and screaming gulls. They encircled the lighthouse, chanting in a language older than breath. "Ilara," they cried, "Flame Mother, open the gate, burn the veil." And Ilara, against her will, responded. She sang in tongues, her voice shaking the bones of the earth. Reality rippled. The gate cracked open like a wound in the universe, and from it they came, the forgotten ones, crawling through the gate. No eyes, no mouths, no forms, just shapes made of need, hunger that never learned a name. They bled into this world like spilled ink, whispering madness, weaving themselves into the threads of existence, replacing thoughts with static. The world began to forget itself. Continents blinked, oceans evaporated, hearts skipped entire decades. But in the center of the unraveling, one presence resisted. Mira. She had reached the beacon room. She stood before Ilara, and Ilara's eyes, empty moments ago, recognized her. Final confrontation, light versus flame. "Mira," Ilara whispered, her voice flickering like a dying bulb. "You're still here." "I never left," Mira said, tears falling. "You brought me this far. Now let me bring you back." The drowned court screeched. The beacon pulsed violently. Ilara screamed, not in pain but in defiance. She pulled on the last thread of herself, the part untouched by the drowned, uncorrupted by flame or fate, and handed it to Mira. A single memory, a lantern lit by hand, not magic. By a girl on a cliff. For ships lost in a storm. Hope, the twist. The light was never the flame. Mira held the memory like a weapon. She raised her hand. The beacon fought her, tried to blind her. But she focused not on the flame. She focused on the light, and saw it wasn't part of the gate at all. It had been fighting it, all along. The flame wanted in, but the light was a prison, a warning, a final shield. And so, Mira made a choice. She extinguished the flame. Collapse. The drowned howled as the flame died. The gate snapped shut, shredding the forgotten things, trying to pass through. The tower cracked at its roots. The sea rose, not in hunger but to reclaim what was stolen. Ilara collapsed into Mira's arms. The drowned court crumbled to ash. Ships vanished like breath on glass. And the lighthouse, at long last, fell silent. 1 year later, Mira stood where the lighthouse had been. Only sea remained. No wreckage, no town, just her. And in her hand, the last lantern of Lighthaven. She lit it, not for gods, not for ghosts, but for those still lost, wandering the edges of reality, waiting for a light to guide them home. The end. If you enjoyed this chilling descent into the unknown, like, subscribe, and share to keep the flame alive. What would you do if you were chosen by the lighthouse? Would you open the gate or extinguish the flame? Let me know in the comments. And remember, the sea never forgets.